Hello viewers, today I would like to acquaint you with the topic discrimination based on region and religion through my lecture. Discrimination is treatment or consideration of or making a distinction in favor of or against a person or thing based on the group, class or category to which that person or thing is perceived to belong to rather than the individual merit. This includes treatment of an individual or group based on their actual or perceived membership in a certain group or social category in a way that is worse than the way people are usually treated. It involves that group's initial reaction or interaction going on to influence the individual's actual behavior towards the group leader or the group, restricting members of one group from opportunities or privileges that are available to another group, leading to the exclusion of the individual or entities based on logical or irrational decision making. Discriminatory traditions, policies, ideas, practices and laws exist in many countries and institutions in every part of the world, even in ones where discrimination is generally looked down upon. In some places, controversial attempts such as quotas have been used to benefit those believed to be current or past victims of discrimination, but have sometimes been called reverse discrimination. In the US, a government policy known as affirmative action was instituted to encourage employers and universities to seek out and accept groups such as African Americans and women who have been subjected to discrimination for a long time. Racial discrimination differentiates individuals on the basis of real and perceived racial differences and has been official government policy in several countries such as South Africa in the apartheid era. Discriminatory policies towards ethnic minorities include the race-based discrimination of ethnic Indians and Chinese in Malaysia. After the Vietnam War, many Vietnamese refugees moved to the United States, where they faced discrimination. As of 2013, Aboriginal people comprise 4% of Canada's population, but account for 23.2% of the federal prison population. According to the Australian government's June 2006 publication of prison statistics, Aborigines make up 24% of the overall prison population in Australia. The Equality and Human Rights Commission found that in England and Wales as of 2010, a black person was 5 times more likely to be imprisoned than a white person. The discrepancy was attributed to decades of racial prejudice in the criminal justice system. In the United States, racial profiling of minorities by law enforcement officials has been called a racial discrimination. Within the criminal justice system in the United States, minorities are convicted and imprisoned disproportionately when compared to majority. As early as 1866, the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1871 provided a remedy for the intentional racism in the employment by private employers and state and local public employers. Racial discrimination in hiring has been shown to exist in the United States and in Europe. By means of their path-breaking field experiment, Bertrand and Sendell Mullainathan showed that applications from job candidates with white-sounding names got 50% more callbacks for interviews than those with African American sounding names in the United States at the start of this millennium. More recently, Stengelbart, Cora Wendeman et al. Replicated and extended their field experiment in Belgium, Europe. They found that racial discrimination in the labour market is heterogeneous by the labour market tightness in the occupation. Compared to the natives, candidates with a foreign sounding name are equally often invited to a job interview in Belgium if they apply for occupations for which vacancies are difficult to fill, but they have to send twice as many applications for occupations for which labour market tightness is low. Regional discrimination. Regional or geographic discrimination is discrimination based on the region in which a person lives or was born. It differs from national discrimination in that it may not be based on national borders or the country the victim lives in, but is instead based on the prejudices against a specific region or one or more countries. Example include discrimination against mainland Chinese within China or discrimination against Americans from the South in the United States. It is often accompanied by discrimination based on accent, dialect or cultural differences. Furthermore, ethnic relations in India have historically been complex. Ethnic relations refer to attitudes and behavior towards people of the other races. India is extremely diverse ethnically, with more than 2000 different ethnic groups. Moreover, within India, there is also significant diversity within regions, and almost every province has its own distinct mixture of ethnicities, traditions and culture. Throughout the history of India, ethnic relations have been more constructive as with mutual cultural influences and destructive as with discrimination and ethnically based violence. Constructive relations. Usually people in different regions respect each other's cultures and traditions. According to local sources, unity in diversity has been growing in India, making the country more tolerant. Examples of constructive ethnic relations in India include the following. People of different religions and castes take part in each other's festivals and celebrations. At times, people of one religion have provided protection an event held by individuals of other faith. For example, this occurred on 12th August 2013 when a group of Muslims escorted a Hindu Bharat. Intercaste marriages occur and have helped to decrease intercaste discrimination. Certain state governments now encourage intercaste or interfaith marriages by providing incentives. Some people visit the shrines of other religions. For example, some Hindu visit Ajmer Dargah, an Islamic shrine. Meanwhile, some Muslims visit the Hindu Sabarmala temple and Vavar shrine. Other Indians visit the Christian Venkakani shrine. Finally, people of any religion can visit and take food in the Sikh Amritsar Golden Temple. Destructive relations. Attack on Bihari people in recent years, the most infamous and most numerous racial attacks in India, have been towards the Bihari people. The state of Bihar suffered from lower economic growth than the rest of India in the 1990s. Reasons given for the state's stunted growth have been included like heavy corruption within the state government, the lack of attention to social welfare and economic development by the Indian central government. As a consequence of the lack of economic opportunity within Bihar, many Biharis migrated to other parts of India in search of work. The Bihari migrants workers have been subjected to a growing degree of xenophobia, racial discrimination, prejudice and violence. In 2000 and 2003, anti-Bihari violence led to deaths of up to 200 people and created 10,000 internal refugees. There are significant Bihari communities in India's northeastern states like Assam, Manipur and Nagaland. In these areas, there have been a number of racial attacks against Bihari people, including a number of massacres, almost all carried out by militant groups. The most recent anti-Bihari attack took place on 18th January 2014, committed by militants from the National Democratic Front of Bodoland in Assam's Korajhar district. The militants pulled 4 youths from Bihar off a bus and shot them to death. 3 others, also from Bihar, were injured in the attack. Prejudice and discrimination against Northeast Indians. In recent years, there have been many reports of discrimination against people from Northeast India. In 2007, the Northeast Support Center and Helpline was started as a separate wing of All India Christian Council. Its stated goal is to increase awareness regarding prejudice and attacks against people from Northeast India. Many Northeast Indian face discrimination, are refused living accommodation when they travel to urban areas to study, and are subjected to racial slurs in reference to the appearances of their eyes. A spokesman for the Northeast Support Center and Helpline has stated that the abuse and harassment of Northeasterners is increasing. In 2012, in an attempt to prevent such discrimination, the Indian government asked all of its states and union territories to arrest anyone who commits an act of atrocity against a Northeasterner under the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Act. A person found guilty under this law can be jailed for 5 years. In 2014, a Northeasterner student named Nido Tanyam was killed in New Delhi. His death was widely publicized. Also, in October 2014, there were 2 separate incidents, one in which a Northeastern student was beaten by 3 men in Bangalore for not speaking Kannada, and a second where a Northeast student was beaten by 7 men in Gurgaon. Attacks on non-natives in Northeast India. In Northeast India, there have been many attacks on those from outside the region. In 2007, thousands of Hindi-speaking labourers fled from Assam after a series of massacres and bomb attacks. In May 2007, 9 of them were killed, another 20 injured in violent attacks. The next month, 26 people from other parts of India were killed in a series of attacks over a period of 6 days. The police blamed United Liberation Front of Assam and the Karbri-Longri National Liberation Front for the violence. In response, the members of Parvotar Hindustani Sammelan staged a hunger strike in Dispur to protect against the merciless killings of innocent and defenseless Hindi-speaking people. Overall, 98 non-locals were killed in Assam during 2007. In March and April 2008, a banned Meitei outfit killed 16 non-locals in Manipur. PHS alleged that anti-social groups in Assam were carrying out a continuous hate campaign against the Hindi speakers in the region. In May 2009, 9 Hindi speakers were killed in Assam and Manipur after the attackers set around 70 houses on fire. During 8th and 10th November 2010, 21 Hindi, Bengali and Nepali speakers were killed by a fraction of the National Democratic Front of Bodoland in Assam. In Meghalaya, the non-indigenous people are often targeted of militant groups. people from other countries are treated differently by some Indian people based both on skin color and country of origin. African people are especially affected by racism in India. Many African people who go to India to study have been victims of racism. Some are denied living accommodations and face other forms of racism. Religion-based discrimination. Religious discrimination is valuing or treating a person or group differently because of what they do or do not believe or because of their feelings towards a given religion. For instance, the indigenous Christian population of the Balkans, known as Rayas or protected flock, was discriminated under the Ottoman Kanun-i-Raya. The word is sometimes translated as cattle rather than flock or subjects to emphasize the inferior status to the Muslim Raya. Restrictions upon Jewish occupations were imposed by Christian authorities. Local rulers and church officials closed down many professions to religious Jews, pushing them into marginal roles considered socially inferior, such as tax and rent collecting and money lending occupations only tolerated as a necessary evil. The number of Jewish permitted to reside in different places were limited. They were concentrated in ghettos and were not allowed to own land. In 1979, consultation on the issue, the United States Commission on Civil Rights defined religious discrimination in relation to the civil rights guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of United States Constitution, whereas religious civil liberties such as the right to hold or not to hold a religious belief are essential for freedom of a religion. Religious discrimination occurs when someone is denied the equal protection of the laws, equality of status under the law, equal treatment in the administration of justice, and equality of opportunity and access to employment, education, housing, public services and facilities, and public accommodation because of their exercise of their right to religious freedom. Religious discrimination and work situations. The law forbids discrimination when it comes to any aspect of employment, including hiring, firing, pay, job assignments, promotions, layoff, training, fringe benefits, and any other term or condition of employment. Religious discrimination and harassment. It is illegal to harass a person because of his or her religion. Harassment can include, for example, offensive remarks about a person's religious beliefs or practices. Although the law does not prohibit simple teasing, offhand comments, or isolated incidents that aren't very serious, harassment is illegal when it is so frequent or severe that it creates a hostile or offensive work environment, or when it results in an adverse employment decision, such as the victim being fired or demoted. The harasser can be the victim's supervisor, a supervisor in another area, a co-worker, or someone who is not an employee of the employer, such as a client or a customer. Religious discrimination and segregation. It prohibits workplace or job segregation based on religion, including religious gab or grooming practices, such as assigning an employee to a non-customer contact position because of actual or feared customer preferences. Religious discrimination and reasonable accommodation. The law requires an employer or other covered entity to reasonably accommodate an employee's religious beliefs or practices, unless doing so would cause more than a minimal burden on the operations of the employer's business. This means an employer may be required to make reasonable adjustments to the work environment that will allow an employee to practice his or her religion. Example of some common religious accommodations include flexible scheduling, voluntary shift substitutes or swaps, job reassignments, and modifications to the workplace policies or practices. Religious accommodation, dress and grooming policies. Unless it would be an undue hardship of the employer's operation of its business, an employer must reasonably accommodate an employee's religious beliefs and practices. This applies not only to the schedule changes or leave for religious observances, but also to such things as dress or grooming practices that an employee has for religious reasons. These might include, for example, wearing particular head coverings or other religious dress such as a Muslim headscarf, or wearing certain hairstyles or facial hair such as thick uncut hair and beard. It also includes an employee's observance of a religious prohibition against wearing certain garments such as pants, etc. When an employee or applicant needs a dress or grooming accommodation for religious reasons, he should notify the employer that he needs such an accommodation for religious reasons. If the employer reasonably needs more information, the employer and employee should engage in an interactive process to discuss the request. If it would not pose an undue hardship, the employer must grant the accommodation. Religious discrimination and reasonable accommodation and undue hardship. An employer does not have to accommodate an employee's religious beliefs or practices if doing so would cause undue hardship to the employer. An accommodation may cause undue hardship if it is costly, compromises workplace safety, decreases workplace efficiency, infringes on the rights of other employees, or requires other employees to do more than their share of potentially hazardous or burdensome work. Religious discrimination and employment policies and practices. An employee cannot be forced to participate or not participate in a religious activity as a condition of employment. Conclusion: the theme therefore seeks to identify strategies for the prevention of religion and region-based discrimination, including measures of education and protection. Throughout the process, there is a broad agreement that all members of society have a responsibility and a role to play in combating it. In all, education is identified as the priority area. Furthermore, the role of media in contemporary society as a major instrument where measures need to be undertaken or improved to ensure that the media addresses religion and region-based discrimination. Also, stringent measures should be undertaken by the government against it, and important legislative measures should be ensured. I sincerely hope this lecture proves to be informative and enlightening for all the viewers. Thank you.